Welcome to the High Performance Hockey Podcast. Today we're joined by lead sports performance coach at Brock University, Vicki Bendus. Vicki started working full-time as a lead sports performance coach at Brock University in 2016. A native of Wasaga Beach, Vicki is currently working on her PhD in applied health sciences at Brock. She researches physical performance factors for on-ice skating speed development. Vicki also obtained a Bachelor's of Science in Kinesiology from Mercyhurst University, where she also played 4 years of NCAA Division I women's hockey. She was a member of Hockey Canada during their 2012 World Championship gold medal run. She has served as a strength and conditioning coach for Hockey Canada, U18 development, and senior programs, and the strength and conditioning coach at Wrestling Canada. She was also a lead sports performance coach at Ridley College. Very, very interesting conversation that we had with Vicki today regarding all things speed, the need for speed, her background in hockey, her PhD studies, and of course, the applied portion of speed development, both in the weight room and on the ice. It's a fantastic conversation. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Vicki. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. I'm really looking forward to it.
Really excited about this. This is going to be an awesome hour. You know, getting prepped for our interview, had a chance to look over several of your presentations, several of your articles, and just fantastic content. I want to first give you some massive props in terms of what you're doing for the sport of hockey, and specifically your PhD work. So thanks so much for giving us all something to continue to chew on in terms of information and apply in the practical setting.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of what I do is just me going through a lot of trial and error and trying to figure out ways to train my athletes better and to do things more effectively in my own environment. And if, I can share those things and other coaches find them useful, then that's a huge bonus.
Absolutely. So I want to start not chatting right directly with speed, and we'll talk about that more as we progress. I want to talk a little bit about your background because it's extremely unique. High performance player in your yesteryears, right? Brampton Thunder, Canadian Women's Hockey League, collegiate hockey player with Mercyhurst, literally won the Patty Kazmaier, if I'm pronouncing that right, Kazmaier Award, which is literally the Hobie. Awarded to the top player in women's NCAA hockey, selected the Canadian women's national team. Literally, that's a storied career. How has that helped you, or has it helped you? Does it give you street credibility? Does it allow you to become a coach that others look to immediately as opposed to building that trust? How has that affected you?
Oh, I mean, it's affected me in every aspect of my life, not just as a coach, but as a person. I don't think there's anything that sets you up better in life or for your career than spending your formative years as an athlete. And especially I think in a team atmosphere, a team environment. When you play sport for a long time, you work with so many different people, so many different teammates, coaches. Sometimes you're on good teams, sometimes you're on not so good teams. And
absolutely,
you build up this just database of experiences that you're always able to draw from. So, for me as a coach now, I think back to coaches that have made an impact on me and things that they did. And they did a lot of similar things where they created an environment that we wanted to be a part of.
Absolutely.
It was a positive environment. It was a safe space, somewhere where you felt that you could be yourself. They pushed you. You were always, working hard to achieve something. And for me now as a coach, that's the kind of atmosphere that I try to build for our athletes, where I want them to come to the gym or wherever we're training and enjoy being there. They could be having a great day, or maybe they're having a not so good day, but when they come to our space, they enjoy it and they feel like they're getting something out of it. I think another piece too is just because I've been through so many of these experiences as an athlete, it gives me a lot of empathy for what my athletes are going through. There aren't too many things that they are going through as student athletes or as high performance athletes that I haven't gone through myself, except I didn't go through a pandemic. So they've got that one on me.
Yeah.
but a lot of the other things, staying up late to study for a midterm, writing a midterm in the morning, and then going to play a hockey game later that day. Those are all things that I went through as well. So it allows you to kind of relate and connect to the athletes And then I think the last thing that I think about is when we think about coaching, oftentimes we think about leadership. Our job in a lot of ways is to lead. But
Yep.
if we're a coach working in a hockey organization, we're a member of a staff, and our staff are a team. And part of being a strength and conditioning coach is being a really good teammate. And at different times of the year, of the week, a different staff member is going to be leading the group. And when I'm not leading, it's my job to support my other teammates, support the head coach or the assistant coach or the medical staff, and make their lives as easy as possible. There's not too many aspects of being an athlete that don't translate to being a coach. And I'm always pulling from those things.
That's fantastic. I think several of those responses were similar to some of the previous practitioners, empathy being a big one. This idea of being an interchangeable member of the team, whatever is needed at that time. Certainly those responsibilities can change pending time of year. And then this idea of building a culture. I think I've probably said it a million times and the listeners will probably roll my eyes, but I think great coaches are a lot like gardeners. Gardeners don't grow flowers. They create an environment for flowers to grow. And if you can create a really special environment and have people wanting to come, people wanting to get better, scary.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah, that's really where the magic happens. And that
yep.
doesn't happen overnight. It takes
Yep.
work, and it takes time and continual effort
Yep.
to keep building that environment. And that's part of the fun. That's part of what we do.
Fantastic. Since 2016, correct me if I'm wrong on my dates, lead sports performance coach at Brock University. Could you walk us through what your responsibilities are on a daily basis?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm, like I said, lead sport performance coach at Brock. I'm responsible for our men's and women's hockey teams, as well as our men's and women's soccer teams. So I've essentially four groups that I'm responsible for. We also run a pretty expansive student internship, a student strength and conditioning internship at Brock. So we have 40 to 50 interns underneath us, and each team kind of has 4 or 5. So part of my role is being responsible for creating and facilitating a formal curriculum for them, and then just
Yep.
giving them coaching experiences and opportunities within the teams that they work with.
Wow. So you're a busy person. Are you working the amount of teams that you have under your umbrella? Is that hockey and wrestling, or are you all over the map in terms of sports?
So my sports are hockey and soccer.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. We have a group of national team wrestlers that train out of Brock. So they're not varsity athletes, but they train out of our performance center, and I do the programming for them as well. So I get kind of 3 main sports: hockey, soccer, and then wrestling.
Awesome. Pivot. Big time right now. The need for speed. Your PhD, physical performance factors for on ice skating speed development. Okay. So I want to ask you to start right off. What is speed? And perhaps, obviously, I don't know if we're using the right terminology, if we really want to be picky with the biomechanics, but maybe it's the velocity, right? Velocity is a vector quality. We got speed and direction. But what is speed to you?
I think for the most part in our field, we tend to use those words interchangeably, speed and velocity.
Yep.
And, they are different. With speed, we're not talking about a direction. We're just talking about a magnitude. With velocity, we've always got both there. But kind of this question of what is speed, I started to think about it a lot, especially after I did the ALTIS Need for Speed course.
Yep.
It was written by Stu McMillan, and he did a fantastic job with that course. If anyone hasn't taken it and is interested, I highly recommend it.
We'll put that on show notes for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, this question of what is speed, we can kind of take a step back. And Stu talks about this continuum of capacities, abilities, and skills. And capacities underpin abilities, abilities underpin skill. And each level that you go up, you're adding layers of complexity. So if we're asking this question, what is speed? Well, first, what are we talking about? We can talk about speed as an ability, or we can talk about speed as a skill. So if we're talking about speed as an ability, that's looking at the physical and the technical components of a speed task. Now, we can measure the magnitude of it. When I go out and do our on-ice speed testing, we're measuring speed as an ability. So it's a player's ability to skate fast, and it's speed out of the context of the game. Well, then what's speed as a skill? That's speed in the context of the game. That's the player's application or expression of their speed as an ability within the tactical elements of the game. So now you're bringing in the cognitive components, the perception, action, the decision making, all of these extra layers of complexity. And again, so if we're talking about speed, what are we talking about? And it's important to understand that my skating speed as an ability sets the ceiling for my speed as a skill. So if I just kind of throw some numbers at it, if I can skate 9 meters per second in a controlled environment on a skating test, that's my ceiling for my skating skill. I'm not going to all of a sudden get a puck and skate 10 meters per second. Yeah. It doesn't work that way. So
the contextual interference at that time, handling the puck, obviously your ceiling is going to be lower.
Exactly. Anytime we're adding layers of complexity, it slows us down. It doesn't speed us up. So we can look at it that way as well.
I like this as well, looking at some of the papers that you've written, this idea in your presentation for speed on this idea versus tools versus craftsman or craftswoman. Could you kind of, I know the idea being, hey, the tools are the force application, the power, the now how to use them. How do you use those and when do you use those and the timing, et cetera? That is being a craftsman or craftswoman. Accurate?
Yeah, no, exactly. So to be good at hockey, you need a lot of different tools. You need, now skating is just one of them. It's a very useful tool and one that we want to have, but we can think of stick handling as a tool and shooting as a tool. So not only do we care about the tools that the player has and how good of tools that they have, we also care about their ability to utilize those tools. So we can look at examples. Maybe I have a player with amazing skating tools. They're incredibly fast, incredibly dynamic. They can stop on a dime, but maybe this athlete is a poor craftsman or a poor craftswoman. They can't use that skating tool very well. Maybe this player, they have poor timing. They're always skating ahead of the play, or maybe when they skate at full speed, they can't catch a pass, so they don't have the hands to support their feet. So there's a gap there. Yep. On the flip side of that, well, maybe we've got a player with average skating tools, average speed, not that fast, kind of nicely in the middle, but maybe they're truly a master of their craft. Maybe they have incredible decision-making skills. They're able to read the game really well. They're always making the right decision. They're always making the right play. Maybe they've got great stick handling skills to support their skating. So they're maximizing the skating tools that they have because they have the skill to apply it within a game. And if we take a step back and look at this, well, first, you can't use a tool that you don't have. So
well said.
Yeah. So if I don't have a very high skating speed, I can't all of a sudden go into the game and just, light it up. If I think of a player like John Tavares, he's, not the fastest skater. He's a good skater, but not the fast skater, but he's one of the most intelligent players in the game. If you watch him, he's always making good plays, good decisions, but he can't all of a sudden, break through the neutral zone like Connor McDavid. Just, he doesn't have that tool available to them.
Yep.
And then the second piece of that, just because you have great tools, just because you're a great skater, it doesn't guarantee your ability to apply that effectively within the game. So we need to look at it from both sides.
It's a complicated game, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a chaotic game.
Yeah, it is. I love your analogy, the tools versus craftswoman. It reminds me of the auto sport analogy. Like as a car, like you have the car and the driver, right? The car's job is to assess energy and create force. The driver is to be able to steer, to be able to turn, to be able to know when to turn. So I love that crossover there, and it's a great analogy. I wanted to shift slightly because we're still on the same topic, but the SCAF article that you wrote, okay, maximum velocity sprinting for hockey players. There was a quote in the article that I want you to expand on if you could. It says, there are many more similarities that drive linear speed, both off and on ice, that are often acknowledged. Could you expand a little bit more on that quote? And then conversely, what do you see as the contrast? So what would be some subtle differences about the two?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're looking at linear sprinting and linear skating and kind of zoom out and compare the two, we can see that there's a lot of global similarities between them. First, just the overall goal of the task is the same. The goal is to get from point A to point B as fast as you can in as little time as possible. How did they do that? Well, they're both using a bipedal alternating gait pattern of stance and swing. If you look at the first three steps of sprinting and skating, the acceleration steps, they're pretty similar. The athlete needs to project their center of mass out. They need to create these angles of attack with a forward torso lean and positive shin angles.
Yep.
The kinetics on and off the ice don't change. So even though we're on the ice, everything still obeys those classic physics laws or Newtonian laws, where the speed of that center of mass is going to be dictated by the magnitude of the propulsive net impulse that the athlete's able to put into the ground or put into the ice. If you want to go faster, then you're going to have to create a larger propulsive net impulse to be able to do that. And then both are motor skills. They're both motor tasks. So there's a coordinative element to both of them. The athlete has to be able to coordinate their limbs in space so that they can get into better biomechanical positions, which sets them up to apply force more effectively in the ground. So there's a lot of things that are the same between sprinting and skating.
Yep.
If we zoom in and want to look more closely at the specific biomechanics, then obviously certainly there's differences. When we're skating, we're on the ice. There's the frictionless environment, which I know you've talked a ton on. That affords the athlete the ability to glide, and it's going to change the mechanical strategy to be able to create that propulsive impulse. We have to create a propulsive angle by pushing laterally, where when we're off the ice, when we're sprinting, friction is given to us. We don't need to do that. We can just push in the direction that we want to go. We can look at ground contact times. They're going to be flipped with sprinting and skating. So, it's certainly biomechanical and kinematic differences between sprinting and skating if we zoom in and look at the specifics. But for our purposes, when we're comparing sprinting and skating, we're not looking for something that's going to mimic skating perfectly.
Yeah.
If we want to do something that's going to look like skating, what are we going to do?
Yeah. Target context, target environment, right?
Yeah. If we want something to look like skating, we're going to skate.
Of course, yeah.
What we can do, because there are those global similarities, is first we can use sprinting as a proxy for skating speed. So if I measure someone's sprinting speed, I can get a pretty good idea of how fast a skater that they're going to be. And then I can use sprinting as a tool to develop those speed capacities that we talked about, which are going to underpin our skating speed as an ability and give the athlete the potential to transfer into faster skating. Just like, I can use a trap bar deadlift to develop my strength capacities. Trap bar deadlift doesn't look anything like skating, but I'm using it as a tool to develop those underpinning abilities, which are going to allow me to skate faster.
Love it. Well, just a fantastic answer. Very detailed and very articulate. Thank you so much. I want to stay with this idea. And you talked about speed as a proxy, as a tool on ice, off ice. And I kind of want to shift right now into the other article and what you found with this and how it might change off ice training for you guys, girls, and then kind of bring it back into how it is going to be affected on the ice or what we would do on the ice. So comparing results of on and off ice speed tests. This is with Cory Kennedy, correct? You guys could you give us a little context? And you worked together, you created a poster, correct?
Yeah, sure. So Cory was the lead on the project. So Cory, he's a strength and conditioning coach. He works actually with the Chicago Cubs now, but I met him through Hockey Canada several years ago. And he asked if I wanted to collaborate on this project. I think it was back in 2017, 2018 now. And basically what we did was we tested about 90 women's hockey players.
So sorry, I'm not cutting you off. That's a pretty big sample.
Yeah. I mean, compared to most research in hockey and in sports science, we know how challenging it is to sample sizes, right? So,
sure.
We were pretty happy with having 90 participants. And what we did with these participants is we tested them off the ice and on the ice. So off the ice, we did a 30-meter sprint with split times. We had the radar gun on them as well, so we were able to get peak speed. We did a 5-meter change direction, which is just a 5-meter out and back. And then we did a few different jump assessments. We did squat jump, counter movement jump, and broad jump. On the ice, our speed test mimicked our speed test off the ice. So we did 30 meters with our split times and a radar gun. And then we did our 5-meter change directions. We ran correlations on those to see which of our off-ice metrics had the strongest relationships our on ice metrics. And what we found was peak speed, so peak sprinting speed within the 30-meter sprint, and counter movement jump were our two strongest correlates to not only linear skating speed, but also change direction ability.
Okay. And those were, I'm just reading off the article here, that the off ice most strongly correlated peak speed and counter movement jump R equals 0.6 to 0.8, correct? So yeah. My question to you is, okay, you took that information. What was was it an aha moment for you? Did you say, hey, you know what? Gosh, this is fantastic. I like the acceleration component of what we've done on ice, but now we need to increase the lengths and train for speed. Was that a big, like, wow, light bulb go off for you?
So I think, yeah, a little bit for me, and probably less so for Cory, because he was a lot more tuned into these things than I was at the time. And he's been a big mentor for me and helped kind of shape my views on sprinting and skating and the value there. So yeah, for me, this is what was one of those first pieces. And then it kind of spiraled into one of my first PhD projects, was taking more of a statistical modeling approach, where now we're taking our off ice assessments, trying to predict players' 30-meter skating time. And out of that model, now we're getting a handful of metrics that are making the actual prediction on skating times. And for that modeling, we got a similar result where top speed sprinting and counter movement jump output, so how high or how much impulse the athlete was producing, are the strongest predictors of skating speed. And with Cory, the study with Cory and with this first project, we found that 70 to 80% of the variance in skating times can be attributed to just how fast you sprint and how high you jump.
So obviously, if we take this into the applied setting, obviously we're a young athlete. We want to work on multiple biomotor abilities. But would you suggest now that an athlete, hockey player, professional hockey player, professional women's hockey player, 5, 6, 7 years of training on a progressive resistance exercise program, would that now shift the focus a lot more on speed and power development? Or what would be the contrast for a player that's had that training age? Would the implications be much more geared towards speed and power?
Yeah, well, I mean, whenever we're training an athlete, we always want to take into consideration training age and what they've done up to that point before they got to us. But if we look kind of globally at what those results of those two studies suggest, is training sprinting and training jumping are going to give us the biggest return on investment for skating speed. So, if we have a young athlete, and I know you're very in tune with LTAD principles, and I mean, to me, from an LTAD standpoint, acceleration and top speed, that's part of being a good athlete. Like, no, not just a hockey player, but we want to give our athletes, whether they're hockey players or soccer players or basketball players, just those movement tools to have so that we can train them later on. So, if I have a young athlete, then for sure we're working on sprinting, we're accelerating, and we're working on top speed, and we're getting the technical components, but we're getting the stimulus as well. If you have an older training age athlete who, maybe they haven't done any top speed sprinting, throughout their career, then obviously you have to be a little bit more strategic and find, different ways to either build them up very slowly and very gradually, or just, some alternatives of trying to get a similar type of stimulus, even though it's hard to perfectly replace that. But, maybe you do something like getting them on a woodway curve, which might be a little bit lower impact, but you still might be able to get kind of that max speed stimulus. But, I think speed is such an important part of our game. And we see how strongly related and how predictive sprinting speed is to skating speed, that, it should really be a part of our programs. And for us, I think something that's changed for me since doing some of these studies is we went from including speed in our programs to prioritizing speed in our programs.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. Very well.
Yeah. And honestly, like the change isn't necessarily to the X's and O's and the sets and reps, but it's a lot around the intent with how we do things. If we're being honest, speed training isn't the most sexy thing or exciting thing. It can be pretty boring and pretty monotonous. It's about doing basic, simple things really, really well, consistently over time. And if you have a perfect speed program on paper, and none of my programs are perfect speed programs by any means, hypothetically. Hypothetically, if we have a perfect speed program, but we have an athlete that's completing it without much intent, without much purpose, kind of just going through the motions, we know that program's not going to be making a positive impact on that player. So part of, what I've really been trying to do with our programs at Brock and our hockey programs is get athletes excited about being fast and get them excited about training to be fast. And all of our speed training now, we call it speed school, because I want them to feel like we're doing something special. They're a part of something.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Full credit to them. They've kind of, hopped in and got excited. And I'm speaking more so on our women's hockey program. But, for them, we're training it year round. We're using video, especially in the summer, to break down some of their sprinting. We're timing consistently because it's a KPI for us.
Yeah, that's great. Real quick, just being nosy here. KPI for you guys, if you don't mind sharing, if you're able to. What are your distances that you're tracking KPI wise in season and off season? Are they consistent in terms of distances and what you hold value in? Is it the full 30 meters? Is it split times? What is it?
Yeah, good question. So we do 30-meter sprint off the ice is our sprinting KPI. On ice, 30-meter skate is our skating KPI. So throughout the entire year, we're always training sprinting, but our test from a testing standpoint during the in-season, our testing more so shifts to 30 meters on the ice, and we're using that as our tracking tool. I do track 10-meter sprints throughout the in-season as part of our monitoring program, but we only track 30s in season at the start of the year. I'll check it once before Christmas, and then we'll check it at the end of the year and then in the summertime.
That's fantastic. I love this idea of speed school. Other question I'm sure the listeners would just want to know from a technology standpoint, what have you found the most success in with you said your timing, whether it's laser, what products do you guys use and have they been successful?
Yeah, good question. I use sport testing timing gates.
Okay.
Both on the ice and off the ice. So those are kind of my main technology that I use. I do have a radar gun. I'm using that as kind of part of my PhD data collection. So it can add, another layer of granularity to some of that speed assessment. But for the most part, our main tool is timing gates.
Fantastic. I want to talk now about improving speed, whether it's now getting a little bit more into the on ice element. So I want to chat with you about this a little bit more. But looking at some of the presentations, again, we talk about mechanical determinants of speed. All right. So obviously the actual off ice speed, right? Baseline strength measures. Would you argue too that the range of motion is critically important, right? Can you get into these positions? Obviously, when we look at biomechanics on the ice, you're overcoming ice friction and air friction. If you're able to get higher joint amplitudes and get lower once the glide phase occurs, that would be a premium off ice as well, and getting those good positions, those good deep positions, range of motion, basic mobility stuff, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. If we look at what determines how fast an athlete moves on or off the ice, it comes down to those three mechanical determinants: how much force they're applying, how fast they're applying it, and the direction that they're applying it. So for us to improve a player's sprinting speed or skating speed, we need to improve one of those three things or multiple of those three things. If we're training and none of those three things have changed, or one got better and the other two got worse, then we're spinning our wheels. So the intervention strategy that we have to get an athlete faster, it has to impact positively one or more of those things. Well, how can we do that? There's different levers that we can pull to influence those three things. Physical capacities is one of them, like you said. So we can look at a player's max strength. We can look at their power. We can look at their sprinting speed, like we talked about. We can look at body composition, and then we can look at mobility, stability. Can they get into those positions that we want? So we can train those physical capacities, which kind of give them the horsepower available to them for skating. What else can we look at? Well, we can look at technical. So we can look at a player's skating proficiency. Can they get into biomechanically advantageous positions to use larger joint amplitudes and create larger impulses? From a technical side, like how challenging it is to change an athlete's technique in anything, right? Whether it's skating, sprinting, an Olympic lift.
100%. I would 100% agree with you. Matter of fact, not opening a totally different can of worms. I question it daily myself, especially with elite players. Like I love this stuff. I like breaking it down, selfishly. I love breaking it down. The real question is, okay, if you do see a leak, how can we change it after you've had thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of reps doing it? So anyways, I question myself on that all the time, Vicki.
Exactly. No, I'm right with you. So it's, it's certainly an option available there, but we just have to understand how challenging it can be to make a technical intervention and whether the return on investment for that time is going to be worth it. So kind of, an example where it might be worth it is if I have a player with very high levels of physical capacity. So if I have a player that's very strong, very powerful, and can sprint very fast, based on our statistics and our modeling, they should skate very fast as well. But what if they don't? What if they're a slow skater? Well, there's something going on there that's not allowing them to harness their physical capacities and transfer that into skating fast. And oftentimes, if you've got a scenario like that, there's a technical thing going on where they're leaking energy left, right, and center and not able to leverage all of that horsepower that they have available to them and actually use it. If you have an athlete like that, then perhaps a technical intervention for them will be an effective choice to further improve their speed. But for a lot of players, I think are within the bandwidth of what, would be acceptable technically. And, spending an incredible amount of time trying to change little things here or there, it just might not make as big of changes as attacking where, they might have a larger deficit. And then, and then the last thing, the last kind of lever that we can pull, which I think is the most unknown and underutilized lever is applying an on-ice speed stimulus. And I always, when I'm thinking about on-ice speed, I always steal from track and from sprinting development. If you ask a track coach, how do you develop a sprinter? How do you get a sprinter faster? They would never say, we go to the gym for an hour, we get stronger, we get more powerful. Then we go to the track and we do drills for an hour and then we call it a day. No, to get faster at sprinting, you need to sprint. And to get faster at skating, you need to skate fast. And I think that's where a big education piece needs to come in, where players and coaches, they need to understand the difference between skating hard and skating fast.
I like this.
Players skate hard all the time. What's skating hard? Skating hard is skating moderately fast for longer distances or durations to the point of fatigue. They do that all the time in practices and games. Well, what's skating fast? Skating fast is skating with maximal intent, maximal speed for very short distances or times and with adequate rest. And the physiology between those two is very different. And so we need athletes to, if we want them to be skating faster, to skate fast. And so go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of this. I was reading. I don't know and if not, I'll send it to you. But have you read Jack Blatherwick's Overspeed Training book? Jack Blatherwick.
I haven't. I've read a lot of his articles and I've read his dissertation, but I haven't read that book.
He was talking about exactly what you're talking about: skating fast, very short, quick bursts over speed, maximal rest. Unfortunately, like looking at it from a hockey player standpoint to a former player, but you don't see a lot of these practices set up that way, right? Like you watch a game and you watch a shift on the ice. It's not 40 seconds of players skating moderate speed. It's 1 to 2, 3 seconds of pop, glide, glide, glide. 1 to 2, 3 seconds of pop, glide, glide, glide. So it's interesting, but you're parlaying right where I wanted to speak to next, which is on ice. You are, and you have been doing your speed school on ice and off ice. So this is, first of all, awesome, because I think we all can learn from this discussion here. Let's start right at the base. You want to start at the speed school on the ice. How do you speak to the coaches about this? How do you build that buy-in right off the get-go?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's probably the question that I get most often from coaches. They see me do a presentation on it, or maybe they see me post on social media about it, and it's something that they see value in and they want to implement, but they're having a tough time kind of getting through to their coaches and being able to actually do it, because it's one thing for us to have something that we want to do on the ice, and it's another thing for us to actually be able to do it. Within traditional hockey setups, the strength and conditioning coach's domain is in the gym. The head coach's domain, it's on the ice, and there's literally a physical barrier of plastic and glass between those domains. Yep. When we're talking about on ice speed training, all of a sudden those lines get blurred, and just because it's so different than what's being done now and what's being done in the past, that it can just make it even more challenging to be able to get through that barrier and be able to start doing it. So how can we go about having those conversations? It starts with just knowing your coach, knowing their personality, and what your relationship is like with them. If you have a coach that's really progressive, really open-minded, it's a pretty direct conversation.
Sure.
You can go up with them and tell them about what on ice speed training is, what its purpose is, why you think it will benefit the players in the programs. You can describe the details of it. This is what it's going to look like. I know this is how much ice I might need. I always suggest to make your first ask pretty moderate to small. 10 to 15 minutes at the start of practice, once a week, and then go from there. If you've got a pretty open-minded coach, then, go have that direct conversation with them. But a lot of us, maybe don't work with coaches who fit that bill. Maybe they're a little bit more traditional, or just not familiar with things and a little bit more hesitant to jump into doing something like on ice speed training. For those coaches, I find the best strategy is to start with testing. So when we do on ice testing, it does a few things for us. First, I think on ice coaches are a little bit more open to allowing you to go out and test. It's a one-off. They're not having to commit ice time every week to you. So they're a little bit more open to allowing you to do it. But as soon as you test something, you've sent a pretty clear message to the athletes and the coaches that this is important. As soon as you test on ice speed, you just send a message loud and clear that I care about skating speed. And then all of a sudden they start caring about skating speed, and it highlights that skating speed is important. So that's a big step.
Okay.
The other things that it does is it gives you your first data point. So if you are able to start doing on ice speed training, you want to be able to show objectively that what you're doing is worthwhile and is effective. So having that kind of pre-post helps a lot. And then what do we do after we do a testing session with our athletes? We take our testing report to our coach, and we sit in their office and we go through it with them. And coaches like to see who's fast and who's slow. Yeah. So usually their eyes, to be honest, go straight to who's slow. And one of the first questions that they ask is, well, how can we make these players faster? And then boom, there's your door that's been open, and that can facilitate the conversation of, hey, maybe we can do some on ice speed training. It could be a very potent tool for us to develop these players' skating speed and to get them faster. So testing is a nice way to start that conversation. Another way that I suggest for coaches that are having a little bit of a challenge is to try to start with smaller groups or smaller cohorts. So if you're working with a bigger team, they might have a handful of healthy scratches that are not, dressing for games. And oftentimes those healthy scratches are skating on their own. Maybe the team played the night before, and the guys or girls who played aren't practicing, and that group of scratches are skating with the assistant coach. Those sessions tend to be a little bit less formal. Assistant coaches tend to be a little bit more laid back, I find. Yeah. So sometimes they're willing to allow you to come on and experiment with on ice speed work. So it's just, you have to try to find some ways to start the conversation. And off the start, I'll take 5 minutes at the end of practice if that's what they'll give me. It's not physiologically perfect, but maybe it'll lead to that down the road. So you have to know the limitations and negotiate a little bit. And if they're giving you scraps, I'll take scraps at the start, and hopefully that will grow. But hopefully, my goal in 3 to 4 years, hopefully it's not a struggle for strength and conditioning coaches to want to do this. And it's just a regular part of hockey development. Right now, I think it's a bit of a novel thing that some of us are doing, but my hope that it kind of becomes just a standard of practice, and that coaches and administrators kind of realize the benefits of on ice speed, and they just program it in with the regular part of the schedule, because they understand it should be a part of it.
And it's crazy, and not to go off on a tangent, I don't know if it's the resource or the culture, right? It's easy to be able to just use the turf or the grass or the court to get your speed work in. But the resource getting on the ice makes it so much more difficult, coupled with the fact, let's face it, we talked at the onset of this, your background as an elite hockey player, like you're able to get right on the ice. If you're a strength coach that doesn't have that, it's tougher. And I'm not suggesting it's impossible, but it's a battle that we'll continue to try to improve upon as we progress our knowledge of speed training. On ice, staying on ice, 2 questions. Number 1, how do you target? And the piggyback to the question, you and I are both members of this ALTIS mentorship. I think I'm a little bit later than you, but I love how Coach Pfaff talks of this bell cow, right? Like you pick 4 or 5 people, you bell cow them. Is it a targeted intervention where you say, you know what, based on our data, 10 people are doing this and 10, or is it, hey, this is the theme for the day. This is what the team is going to be doing. And here's why.
Yeah, we right now with our honest speed work, it's global. We're not getting very granular with profiling or anything like that. Everyone's doing similar things. How we tend to structure it. So within our women's hockey program, our coach has allowed me to use the first 30 minutes of practice on Mondays, which I'm very, very thankful for. Very grateful for. Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, she's awesome. So we've been doing this for a few years now, and how our sessions tend to run is it starts with a very thorough off ice warm up. And, I can't emphasize how important that is. If coaches want to do on ice speed work, you have to take it seriously. And part of that is making sure that the athletes are going through a comprehensive warm up. On ice speed work, it can be demanding on the hips and groins, and we want to make sure that our players are ready for that. We would never, if we were doing a sprinting session, we would never allow our players to show up and jog a lap and then start sprinting.
Sure.
So the same rules apply with on ice speed work. So the athletes get to the rink. It starts with an off ice warm up, and we're going through our soft tissue work, our ground based mobility stability work. We're building up with our movement prep, and then we always finish with some neural prep where the athletes are building up and doing a few 20 to 30 meter sprints before they go out on the ice. Once we're out on the ice, then we do an on ice warm up, something short. Sometimes we'll play a game, play some capture the flag or tag or something to get their heart rates up a little bit.
Yep.
And then we'll do a few build up accelerations, and then we're into kind of more of the speed work. I typically do 1 to 2 technical drills, I don't spend a lot of time on it, but just little concepts that we'll touch on. And then we'll get into the meat and potatoes where we'll be hitting that skating stimulus where we're trying to get appropriate volumes and intensities of full speed sprinting, full speed skating to make sure that we're getting that stimulus. Each session, I typically have a goal or a theme, 1 of 4. So it'll either be a static acceleration session. So for these, it's, think of those first 3 steps, being able to accelerate from a stop or from, a very slow glide. It might be a max speed session where we're trying to get the athletes up to their max skating speed. It might be a dynamic acceleration session where this is when the athlete's accelerating while moving already at a pretty good clip. So think of like changing gears.
Yep.
Or curvilinear skating as well. And then lastly, it might be a change direction session. So the technical and the stimulus will be directed toward whatever our theme of the day is. That's kind of the main way that we run sessions. Every 3 to 4 weeks during the stimulus portion, I'll bring out the timing gates, and we'll kind of get that data point and get our longitudinal data so that we know that we're moving in the right direction. And then very occasionally, only on short weeks. So typically our games are on Thursdays and Saturdays.
Okay.
So we put our on ice speed work on Mondays. Very occasionally we'll have a game on a Wednesday. So it'll be a shorter week, or we'll have a game on a Sunday and we won't practice on Monday. So we'll do speed work on Tuesdays. On those weeks, I don't want to take practice time away from our coach because we have less of it, but we also don't want to miss our on ice speed stimulus. So on those instances, we'll run what I call an integrated speed session. And the coach and I will sit down the day before practice, and we'll design practice together and choose drills where we can incorporate an on ice speed stimulus within the drill itself. So she'll have a goal for the practice. I'll have a theme that I'm trying to hit, and then we'll collaborate and build that out. So if my theme is static acceleration for that day, and she wants to warm the goalies up with a skate pass shoot drill, then we'll do, for example, like the 4 blue lines, 4 lines of the blue lines. And we'll tell the players the theme or the intent of this drill is static acceleration. So for each rep, we want you to be exploding maximally for the first 5 steps, and then, go finish the drill, do whatever the rest of the drill is. But across 5 or 6 minutes, all of a sudden the athletes have got 5 to 6 max effort, good quality accelerations. So it's a way to meet halfway and be able to still get that stimulus in, but we're still, allowing for the coach to get done what they want to get done. It also, I like it because it helps start to bridge that gap. So we were talking about speed as an ability and speed as a skill. Well, now we're starting to bring some of that speed out of context and bring it into context, and teaching athletes how to use and when to use that speed effectively within contextual scenarios. So that's an important piece too with on ice speed. We're training speed as an ability, we're training it out of context, but we also want to be having those conversations and teaching athletes how to use that speed in context so that we can, bridge that gap and see, them being able to apply it within the proper tactical scenario within a game.
Great answer. I want to dive a little bit more granular. If you could provide maybe a heuristic or two, are there rules of thumb that you use for groups in rest? I mean, if it's anything over 30 meters, 2 minutes, how are you ensuring that we're working the quality of speed without 15 different helpers out there, knowing you have the amount of rest that you need before your next set or before your next rep? And then the other question is, we talked about static, max speed, dynamic, change of direction. Do you periodize that over a certain time? For example, like you're going to work on acceleration for 3 weeks, then this, or is it undulating? Is it every week we have something different? So rest and how you periodize. Sorry, that's a windy question.
Yeah, no, that's all right. You might need to remind me on the second part.
Okay, no worries. Yeah.
So for the reps, like we know with speed training, for it to be effective, we need the athletes to be recovering between reps, or else it turns quickly into conditioning. And we know this from training speed off ice, how uncomfortable it can be to have an adequate rest period, because athletes aren't used to that. They're not used to sitting around and waiting. And I can tell you, it is the exact same uncomfortable feeling on the ice.
I can only imagine.
of having to wait around. So it's just, you kind of have to acknowledge that and be ready for that a little bit. But, just doing things like, instead of making 4 lines, you make 2 lines. So that guarantees that the athletes are getting extra rest. And, you can see them getting a little bit fidgety when they're waiting in those long lines. But it's an important part of it to allow that quality to be maximal. And then from a periodization standpoint, with the on ice speed, we take a bit of a short to long approach in the off season and in the in season. So if we're starting on ice speed work, we're typically going to start with static excel, and then build out from there into dynamic excel and max speed. Change of direction, it's probably the one that I use the least. And that's mostly just because of the amount of change of direction load that they're often already getting. And just from a return on investment standpoint, I think we probably get a little bit more return on investment from focusing on static excel and top speed than change of direction. So we still do it, but probably just a little bit less often, less frequently than some of the other ones.
Like it. Last question about these sessions that you run. Have you categorized or created a library of your drills that you use? For example, I would imagine for static speed, I know that looking at one of your presentations, perhaps you used a tool, like you're pushing or driving into a net, right? Like there's a little bit more. I'm not trying to get, again, too granular because I'm passionate about this stuff like you are. I look at this run to glide, like so static or max. I look at it in 2 different models. I'm going in my mind. I read an interesting book, almost in the middle of it. Dan Cleather, Force, that book. It's interesting. A really interesting book. And he talks about 2 models that he uses for gait and top end sprinting. He talks about the sprinting model, which is a spring mass model, right? Where the leg is essentially a spring, the body's the fixed point of mass. And then he talks about this idea of a compass gait model, where the leg is a rigid lever. Like when you're starting from a dead standstill, we have a rigid lever hammering into the ice, right? I wanted to ask you about your drill sets. For example, how might your drills change? Obviously, distance, I understand, from something like a static or a max speed or a dynamic speed in terms of what you use and how you use them. That make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, my drill bank, I guess, is always kind of growing, because a lot of this right now is still trial and error.
Of course, it's great.
There's no playbook for this.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit of a mad scientist out there, and a lot of times I'm just kind of inventing drills along the way. But one thing I will say is with drills, it's important to remember what our goal is. If we're trying to get a stimulus, if we're adding complexity to that drill, then we're going to be taking away some of the intensity. So, a lot of my drills are very simple and just, free skating type of drills, but we can still be a little bit of creative or experimental within some of those constraints. Like, you mentioned us pushing the net. So we wanted to try to find ways to resist some of our acceleration work. So we were pushing nets around and our loads were empty net, one player or two players that you're pushing.
You mean you didn't get 1080s for the
we sure gave it our best shot, but we weren't successful. So we find other ways. So that's one example. Or, sometimes we'll have players towing each other if we want to get some resisted work, but it's, I'm always out there just, trying different tweaks on different things. And, sometimes the drill just falls flat and I'm watching, I'm like, man, this is crap. I'm not going to do this one again.
Yeah.
So that's part of the process and part of the fun.
That's fantastic. From a standpoint of your speed school, wrapping it up, we have in season or during in season, and you have off season. Are the athletes typically at Brock, are they staying in the summer with you and obviously during season, or do you lose a lot of them when they go travel? Is that a challenge for you? Do they still stay with that speed school? How does that work from looking at the entire, yearly plan, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. With us at the university, it's usually a little bit of a mix. Okay. So, some athletes will stay around and they're either local or maybe they get jobs there for the summer. But a lot of them go home. Obviously, the last 2 years of COVID, we haven't been able to train in the summer at all. So it's all been, them training at home, and absolutely that makes a huge challenge to continuing high quality speed school during the summer, because for the most part, they're doing it on their own. And during the first COVID year, I knew that was going to be a big challenge because of, just worrying that the quality of what they were doing wasn't going to be as high, that they might be going through the motion. So the first COVID year, I started what we called virtual speed school. So every
good for you, Vicki. Good for you. I need to hear more about virtual speed school.
Yeah,
talk to me.
Every 3 weeks, I just had them send in a video of themselves, like one accelerating and one top speed. And then I would break it down. I'd draw some lines on them, send it back. And so the whole summer, they'd be sending me videos. I'd be sending them back. And it was just a way to drive intent, getting them to video themselves. Again, all of a sudden it's making it important, and it's forcing them to, be engaged in the process and watch their own videos and stuff like that. And they love it. Like they like seeing themselves sprint, and, they like having little things to work on over the course of the summer. It's a lot more, engaging for them than just going out there and, following the team builder program without a real big purpose.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. And you get to practice selfishly as a coach, right? In improving your biomechanical eye, your feedback and growing as a practitioner as well.
Oh yeah, no, massive. That's, I'm always trying to develop my coach's eye and get better at coaching as well. When I was an athlete, that was one of the things that I wasn't exposed to a lot of, was speed training and good speed training. So, I've really tried over the past several years of trying to develop that. And, I'm constantly bugging coaches. Cory Kennedy is one of them. He's a great speed coach. And so I'm always asking him to look at some videos of my athletes and just better develop how I see sprinting and see what's good sprinting and what's not good sprinting.
Our guest today has been Vicki Bendus. Vicki, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks a lot, Anthony. It was a lot of fun.